You don't have what it takes, my teacher said. I launched what they mocked. Today, they beg for my signature on their resumes. My name's Evan, 28, male, and if I close my eyes, I can still hear it. You don't have what it takes. 14 years ago, my high school computer science teacher, Mr. Harlan, said that to me in front of the whole class, like it was a joke, like humiliating me was just part of his job. I laughed it off then, pretending it didn't sting, but that sentence carved itself into my bones. Every late night, every bug that broke me, every line of code I wrote with shaky hands, it was his voice I was fighting. Mr. Harlan, 45, male, had this reputation for breaking students early. He called it tough love. Really, it was just cruelty dressed as wisdom. If you weren't his golden boy, Kyle, the quarterback who couldn't even open a text editor without instructions, you were a target. He'd slam his hand on my desk when I got an answer wrong, roll his eyes when I asked a question, and once he even ripped my project notes in half because my ideas weren't realistic. I was 16. My unrealistic idea was a social platform for niche communities. Yeah, imagine telling a kid in 2011 that online communities were dumb. I wasn't alone, though. My best friend back then was Lila, 17, female, quiet as a shadow but sharp as hell. She sat next to me, sketching app interfaces in her notebook while I scribbled out database tables. She never said much, but when Harlan would sneer, she'd lean over and whisper, "Ignore him. Build it anyway." Those words were the only reason I didn't throw everything away. My parents, David, 52, male, and Clara, 49, female, didn't get it. They loved me, sure, but they wanted me to be practical. Dad worked construction, Mom was a nurse. Hard, honest jobs. Computers were, to them, a hobby, like video games or model trains. They'd ask if I had a backup plan, push me to apply for community college accounting programs, remind me that no one makes money building fantasy projects. They weren't cruel like Harlan, but their doubt echoed in the same room with his voice. And it wore me down. The turning point came junior year, science fair. I submitted a prototype, ugly, clunky, but mine. It was a small forum app built from scratch. I remember the moment like a movie. Judges walking past, kids showing off baking soda volcanoes, and then Harlan standing there smirking at my booth. He didn't even ask questions. Just leaned in close enough for only me to hear and said, "Nobody will ever use this. You're wasting your time." I held that rage in, shoved it down where no one could see. But that night, lying in bed staring at the ceiling, I promised myself, one day, I'll build the thing you said I couldn't, and you'll choke on it. After that science fair humiliation, everything about school felt poisoned. I'd walk into class already bracing for whatever jab Mr. Harlan had waiting. Sometimes it was subtle, like praising Kyle's half-baked apps while ignoring my working prototypes. Sometimes it was public, like the day he projected my code on the screen, circled a minor bug, and told the whole class, "This is why Evan will never make it, sloppy and unfocused." Everyone laughed. I laughed too, pretending I didn't feel like my skin was peeling off. But the worst part wasn't him. It was watching people I trusted start to believe him. Lila was the only one who didn't drift. She'd sneak me energy drinks during our marathon coding sessions and say, "Screw Harlan, you'll prove him wrong." But the rest, they vanished. Classmates I thought were friends would roll their eyes when I talked about my projects. Even my parents, God, I wanted them to see me, to actually see me. Instead, Dad would slap the newspaper down at breakfast and say things like, "Look at these job openings. Good, steady money. When are you going to apply for something real?" Mom would nod, tired from night shifts, and tell me not to gamble on pipe dreams. They thought they were helping, but all I heard was, "Maybe Harlan's right." I remember one night in particular. It was 2 a.m., our old Dell wheezing under the weight of the code I was pushing. My hands were shaking from too much caffeine and too little sleep. Mom walked in, saw the mess of papers and half-eaten ramen on my desk, and sighed. She didn't yell, she never yelled. She just looked at me and said, "Evan, you're going to burn out chasing something that isn't real." Then she closed the door. I sat there in the dark, cursor blinking at me like it was mocking me, and thought, maybe I am insane. Maybe none of this matters. The thing that kept me tethered was Lila. She was the first person who treated my crazy ideas like they mattered. We'd meet up at the public library, sharing one laptop between us, whispering excitedly about features and layouts while the old security guard shushed us. She sketched clean, minimal interfaces, things I couldn't even imagine. I'd write the code. Together, we built scraps of something that felt like a future no one else could see. But the pressure got worse senior year. College applications. Every counselor I talked to pushed me toward accounting, business admin, maybe teaching. Something safe. Harlan made sure to remind me, in his oh-so-helpful tone, that computer science programs were cutthroat and not for dreamers. He wrote recommendation letters for other students. He refused mine, said he didn't want his name attached to half-baked ideas. I still remember the way his pen tapped on the desk when I asked, like he couldn't wait for me to leave his office. I felt trapped. No school, no support, no confidence. Just a handful of lines of code and a best friend who believed in me when no one else did. That spring, sitting in the library with Lila, I said the words out loud for the first time. Then we'll launch it ourselves. Don't forget to subscribe. Graduation felt less like an ending and more like exile. Everyone else was throwing caps in the air, hugging teachers, bragging about which schools had accepted them. I just stood there with my blank smile and my crumpled diploma, knowing Harlan had won. No recommendations meant no real shot at scholarships. My parents, David and Clara, sat stiff in the bleachers, clapping, sure, but I could see the worry lines on their faces. To them, it looked like I'd just wasted 4 years on a hobby that didn't pay. Lila was the only one who didn't look at me like a disappointment. After the ceremony, she pulled me aside under the bleachers, her notebook clutched to her chest. "So," she whispered, eyes glowing, "are we really doing this?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to admit I was terrified, that maybe my parents and Harlan were right, that maybe I'd end up broke and bitter. But then I looked at her sketches, the ones we'd stayed up all night drawing in the library, and I heard Harlan's voice again. "Nobody will ever use this." Rage filled the hollow in my chest. "Yeah," I said, "we're doing this." That summer was brutal. While Kyle was posting dorm selfies and frat rush invites, I was stocking shelves at a hardware store by day, coding by night. Our office was my parents' garage, a folding table between dusty boxes of Christmas lights and Dad's tool chest. Lila biked over almost every night, her hair damp from the summer humidity, and we'd grind until sunrise. She had this way of keeping me alive. Every time I wanted to give up, she'd toss another energy drink my way and mutter, "Ignore the noise, just ship it." But the noise didn't go away. Dad would stomp into the garage, shaking his head at the extension cords snaking everywhere. "Evan, this isn't sustainable. You're 18. You need a plan." Mom would hover in the doorway with her gentle voice saying, "Just one accounting course at the community college, please." I knew they weren't trying to kill my dream, but it felt like death by 1,000 cuts. Every conversation ended with, "Be practical. Grow up." The first real fracture came in August. We'd hit a wall, our database kept collapsing under test traffic. I was losing my mind, slamming the keyboard, ready to throw the whole laptop through the garage window. Lila, usually calm, snapped back at me. "You can't just brute force this, Evan. You're not listening to me." Her voice cracked on that last word, and I froze. For a second, it wasn't just code between us, it was everything. Pressure, fear, maybe something more we weren't ready to admit. I stormed out, walked down the street with my fists clenched, and all I could think was, Harlan's voice is still winning. Even when he's not here, he's inside my head. That night, lying awake, sweat sticking my shirt to my back, I realized something that scared me. If this thing ever made it, it wouldn't just prove him wrong. It would prove my parents wrong. My classmates wrong. Everyone. And I wanted that more than I wanted to breathe. We launched in September. Not because it was ready, God it wasn't, but because I couldn't stand staring at unfinished code anymore. I bought a $15 domain name with money I didn't have, duct-taped our half-working app to a free hosting service, and hit publish. We called it Nestboard. A simple idea. Micro-communities where people could create nests around their obsessions, local bands, niche hobbies, even just inside jokes. No algorithms, no corporate gloss, just people finding people. Lila designed the interface. Clean, minimal, little bird icons that made it feel friendlier than it was. To me, it looked like the future. To everyone else, it looked like a joke. The first day we posted about it on Facebook and Twitter, begging our classmates to join. I was buzzing, heart pounding every time I refreshed the dashboard. 10 users, then 20, then nothing. The silence felt louder than any mockery, until the mockery came. Kyle, Harlan's golden boy, tweeted a screenshot of our glitchy homepage with the caption, "Look, Evan made Craigslist for nerds, LMAO." His frat buddies piled on. Someone photoshopped the logo into a bird crashing into a window. Within hours, the comment section was a funeral pyre. And then Harlan himself chimed in. He didn't tag me, but he didn't have to. He wrote this smug little Facebook post that got shared around town. Proud to see my former students trying things, even if some of them haven't quite grasped what it takes to succeed in tech. That phrase again, what it takes. I swear I saw red. My parents didn't help. At dinner that week, Dad folded his arms and asked how many users we had. I muttered, 50. He nodded like that proved his point. Mom squeezed my shoulder, trying to be gentle, and said, maybe it's time to scale back and think about college again. I wanted to scream. The only thing keeping me from smashing the whole garage apart was Lila. She kept showing up, even when I was sulking in silence. One night, she brought pizza and just said, ignore them. They laughed at MySpace too. I almost kissed her then. I didn't. Instead, I pushed another commit and swore we'd make it through, but something shifted. The jokes, the silence, the constant doubt. It didn't just hurt anymore. It hardened. Every sarcastic comment, every pitying look from Mom, every smug word from Harlan, it became fuel. Late one night, staring at the screen, I whispered to myself, one day you'll beg to put my name on your resume, and I'll make sure everyone knows how you treated me. That was the moment it stopped being about just launching an app. It became personal. Don't forget to subscribe. Update. Wow. Okay, I didn't expect so many people to care about this mess. I posted about Harlan and the launch half out of spite, half because I thought nobody would ever believe how deep this crap cut. And now I've got strangers DMing me telling me to keep building, others calling me delusional, and one dude who literally wrote, just give up, bro. You're embarrassing yourself. Thanks, Kyle. I know that was you. Let me set the record straight. Yeah, the launch bombed. Nestboard barely limped out of the gate. The dashboard looks like a flatline. The mockery hasn't stopped. Every time I open Twitter, someone's still reposting that stupid bird-crashing meme. And yes, my parents are circling like vultures, dropping not-so-subtle hints about real jobs and night classes. Dinner feels like a job interview. I keep failing. But here's the thing. I don't care anymore. Or maybe I do, but in a different way. Every insult, every laugh, it's not breaking me like it used to. It's welding something inside me, rage, focus, whatever you want to call it. I'm not building this for the market anymore. I'm building it for me. For 16-year-old me, sitting in that classroom with Harlan leaning over my shoulder, telling me I don't have what it takes. Some of y'all in the comments said I should confront him directly. Walk into his classroom, shove the app in his face, and tell him to choke on his words. Believe me, I've fantasized about that. But that's not revenge. That's noise. What I want is silence. I want him to see my name everywhere and know he's the reason it exists. I want my parents to sit at a dinner table and brag about the son they doubted. I want Kyle and every frat boy who mocked me to try to get hired by me one day and know I remember every word. Lila's still here, by the way. She read through the first post and laughed at how dramatic I made her sound. You forgot the part where I cried over the database bug, she said. But she also looked me dead in the eye and told me she's in this with me no matter how ugly it gets. Ian. That means more than I can put into words. So yeah, this isn't over. The launch was a joke, but jokes fade. What I'm building now, the anger, the obsession, the fire, it's not fading. It's only getting sharper. And when the tables finally turn, I swear on everything, I won't let them forget how they treated me. After the disaster launch, I went dark. No more begging classmates to sign up. No more pathetic shares on Facebook. Lila and I stopped trying to convince people. Instead, we locked ourselves in that garage and tore the whole thing apart. The old nestboard was dead. We started again from scratch. It was brutal. Weeks blurred into months. My fingers cramped so bad I wrapped them in ace bandages just to keep typing. Lila's notebooks turned into a graveyard of sketches, each one discarded with a frustrated groan. Some nights she'd throw her pencil across the garage and collapse onto the floor, muttering, We're insane, completely insane. And I'd just keep coding, because if I stopped, I'd hear Harlan's voice again. The turning point came by accident. One night, around 3 a.m., I pushed a tiny feature we debated scrapping, a tagging system that let communities cross-link in weird, organic ways. I didn't think much of it. But 2 days later, some random knitting group in Ohio stumbled on it, started linking to other nests, and suddenly, they weren't just knitting, they were sharing patterns, trading life stories, posting photos of their grandkids. Then it snowballed. A punk band in Chicago used it to organize shows. A birdwatching group in Oregon used it to catalog sightings. It was messy, glitchy, half the features broke on mobile, but people were using it. Actually, using it. I remember the night we hit 1,000 active users. Lila screamed so loud the neighbor's dog started barking. We danced in that grimy garage, high on caffeine and disbelief, until she tripped over a power cord and almost yanked the server offline. I laughed harder than I had in years, but not everyone was laughing. Word spread back home. Kyle messaged me first, a half-assed, "Hey man, congrats on that app thing. Can I get an invite?" Like I hadn't seen his mocking posts. I left him on red. Then my parents started noticing. Dad hovered by the garage one evening, pretending he needed a tool, watching me type with this look I couldn't read. Pride? Fear? Regret? I don't know. Mom brought me sandwiches without saying anything. The silence felt louder than words. And then, this still burns, Harlan found out. I know because one of my old classmates screenshotted his comment on a news article about two local kids building a promising social platform. His words? "Glad to see some of my students finding their footing, even the ones who struggled at first." Struggled. Like he hadn't spent years drilling "you don't have what it takes" into my skull. Like he was the benevolent mentor who'd nudged me onto the right path. I punched the garage wall so hard my knuckles split. Blood smeared across the keyboard, dripping between the keys, but I didn't stop typing. Not this time. That was the night I decided. It's not enough to succeed. I want him to choke on it. Success spreads like wildfire. Slow at first, then all at once. By the end of that year, Nestboard wasn't just a side project, it was real. 10,000 users, a write-up in a tech blog, a couple of small investors sniffing around. My phone buzzed non-stop, and for the first time in my life, it wasn't spam. It was opportunity. And that's when the parasites came crawling back. Kyle showed up first. Not a text, not a call. He literally drove to my parents' house and knocked on the garage door like we were still kids. When I opened it, he grinned like the frat boy mascot he still was. "Bro, long time. Man, I always knew you'd pull this off. I've been telling people for years you were onto something." I swear I almost laughed in his face. Instead, I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and let him ramble. He wanted in. Marketing, outreach, community engagement. Buzzwords he clearly didn't understand. Basically, he wanted a free ride on the rocket he used to mock. When I told him no, his smile cracked. "Don't be like that, man. I can call people. I know how to hype. You need that." When I shut the door in his face, he lost it. Slammed his fist against the garage door so hard it rattled the shelves inside. "You think you're better than me now?" he screamed. My mom came rushing out of the house, demanding to know what was going on. Kyle stormed off, yelling over his shoulder, "You'll regret this, Evan. Don't forget who made you look cool in high school." Like I ever looked cool. But the real explosion came later. "Mr. Harlan." It started with an email, professional, polished, sickeningly smug. "Evan, I'm so proud of what you and Lila have accomplished. I'd love to feature Nestboard in the school newsletter as an example of what my students can achieve. Perhaps we could meet to discuss ways I can support your continued growth." Support. The man who refused to sign my recommendation letter now wanted to claim me. I ignored it. A week later, he showed up in person. I was giving a talk at the local community center about entrepreneurship. It wasn't fancy, just me, a projector, a few dozen curious faces. Halfway through, the doors opened, and there he was. Harlan, striding in like he owned the place. He sat front row, arms crossed, nodding along like some proud father figure. I almost lost my train of thought. My palms went slick with sweat. Afterward, while people were asking questions, he inserted himself. "Yes, I remember Evan well. He always had spirit, even if focus was a struggle." I knew he'd grow into himself eventually. People laughed politely. My stomach twisted. He was rewriting history right in front of me. When I tried to leave, he cornered me in the hallway. Let's be civil, Evan. You don't want to seem ungrateful. Opportunities like this, they require the right connections. People respect me. I can make sure you're remembered kindly. Something inside me snapped. I shoved past him, hard enough that he stumbled into a bulletin board, papers scattering. Gasps echoed down the hall. My chest was heaving, fists clenched so tight my knuckles went white. You don't get to rewrite this. You don't get a piece of me. He straightened, red-faced, eyes wild. For the first time, I saw the mask slip. Careful, Evan, he hissed. I built you. Don't make me tear you down. That night, I punched a hole in my bedroom wall. My parents heard the crash but didn't come in. They didn't need to. They knew this wasn't just about an app anymore. Update. Okay. So, a lot has happened since my last post, and honestly, I'm still buzzing like my nerves are plugged into a wall socket. First off, shout out to the people who said, "Don't let Kyle back in, he'll just drag you down." You guys were psychic. Dude actually showed up at my garage like some sitcom villain, acting like we were bros. When I told him no, he had a full-blown meltdown in my parents' driveway. My mom still talks about how the neighbors' kids were watching from their bikes while he screamed, "You'll regret this," like a rejected Batman sidekick. Embarrassing doesn't even cover it. But the real nightmare? Harlan. Remember how I said he emailed me? I ignored it. Thought that was the end of it. Nope. He crashed one of my talks, walked right in, front row, smirking like the proud mentor who saw my potential all along. I nearly threw up on stage. And then, this is the part that still makes me want to put my fist through a wall, he started spinning the story like he was my guiding hand. Told the audience I was always spirited but unfocused, that he knew I'd grow into myself eventually. Some of y'all joked in the comments that he'd try to ride my coattails. Not funny anymore. The man is seriously trying to rewrite history with himself as the benevolent teacher who made me. And the worst part? People believed him. They clapped. They clapped. When I tried to leave, he cornered me. Told me I owe him gratitude, that people respect him, and that without his connections, I'll get torn down just as fast as I climbed up. I snapped, shoved him hard enough that he ate bulletin board thumbtacks in front of half the room. And for a second, I swear, he looked unhinged. Like all those years of fake calm had cracked and something feral was underneath. I know what some of you are going to say. Lawsuit, career suicide, play it safe. But listen, this isn't just about success anymore. It's about memory, about erasing what he did to me and replacing it with his fake version. I can't let that happen. If I do, it's like he wins all over again. And Lila, she saw the whole thing. Afterward, she just grabbed my arm, dragged me out into the night air and whispered, "Make him eat it. Every word." Her voice was shaking, but her eyes? Fire? So yeah, that's where I'm at. Everyone keeps telling me to be careful, to focus on the app, to keep my head down. But I can't. I won't. It's time for him to choke. The rage simmered for weeks after that confrontation with Harlan. Every time I opened my laptop, every time Nestboard's user count ticked upward, I imagined him somewhere, smirking, telling people he was responsible for me. It wasn't enough to succeed anymore. I needed to drag him into the light and pin him there. The chance came sooner than I thought. The local newspaper reached out for a feature. From garage to growth, 2 hometown kids build a social platform. Lila and I sat for photos in the grimy garage, me hunched over the keyboard, her sketchbook open. For once, the world saw us the way we saw ourselves. And then, buried in the last paragraph, the reporter included a quote from Harlan. "Evan always had potential. I just tried to push him toward excellence. I'm proud to have been part of his journey." I saw red. I called the reporter that night, voice shaking, and told him the truth. About the ripped notebooks, the public humiliation, the refusal to write me a letter. At first he hesitated, muttering about journalistic balance. But then I offered something better, receipts. I still had my old science fair notes, crumpled, ripped down the middle, with Harlan's red ink scrawled across the top. Unrealistic, never going to work. The next article ran a week later. Headline: Local startup founder says teacher told him he'd never make it. And right below it, A photo of me holding up those torn notes like evidence in a trial. The internet ate it alive. Reddit threads, Twitter debates, YouTube commentary videos. Suddenly, I wasn't just the kid from nowhere who built an app. I was the kid who proved his teacher wrong. And that's when Harlan snapped. He showed up at my parents' house. Middle of the afternoon, no warning. I heard shouting from the garage and ran outside to find him on the porch, red-faced, veins bulging, screaming at my dad. "Do you know what your son is doing to me? He's slandering me. My career, my reputation, he's ruining everything." Dad tried to calm him down, but Harlan wasn't hearing it. He saw me, and it was like gasoline on a fire. He charged forward, finger jabbing the air. "You think you're some kind of hero? You're a liar. You're unstable. You never would have made it without me." For a second, I thought he was going to swing. My mom was crying, begging him to leave. Neighbors started gathering on the sidewalk, phones out, recording. I didn't back up. I didn't flinch. I just stepped closer, close enough that he could see the camera lenses pointed at him, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You told me I didn't have what it takes, and now you're begging to be remembered as part of this. But here's the truth, Harlan. Your name's only in my story as the villain. That's all anyone will ever remember." The look on his face, that mix of rage, humiliation, and dawning realization, was the moment I'd been waiting for since I was 16. He screamed something incoherent, shoved a potted plant off the porch railing so it shattered on the concrete, and stormed off while half the neighborhood filmed him. By that evening, the video was on Facebook, then Twitter, then everywhere. The comments? Brutal. Parents calling for him to resign. Former students chiming in with their own horror stories. Memes of him red-faced and spitting on my porch. Overnight, the man who once defined me with a single sentence was reduced to a punchline. And me? I felt lighter than I had in years. By the time the video of Harlan's meltdown hit 1 million views, Nestboard had hit 100,000 users. Investors who once ghosted me were suddenly in my inbox, tripping over themselves to talk funding. For the first time, I wasn't chasing. I was being chased. And yet, what mattered most wasn't the numbers. It was the silence. Harlan vanished. No more Facebook posts, no more smug little sound bites. The school board accepted his early retirement. Translation: he was forced out. Former students came out in droves with their own stories. Humiliation, cruelty, dreams crushed. Turns out I wasn't the only one he tried to break. I was just the first who refused to stay broken. The irony? Some of those students had built careers, designers, programmers, marketers, and suddenly they were emailing me. Not just congratulations, resumes, cover letters. "I'd love the chance to work with you." People Harlan had mocked into silence were now begging for a seat at my table. Even Kyle tried again. Sent me a LinkedIn request with a message. "No hard feelings, bro. Let's build something great together." I blocked him. But the real gut punch came at dinner one night. Mom slid a newspaper across the table. Front page, me and Lila, headline about a major funding round. Dad cleared his throat, awkward as hell, and said, "We were wrong, Evan, about everything. You made this real." His voice cracked on that last word. My dad, the man who'd pushed real jobs my whole life, finally admitted I built something he couldn't ignore. Mom just reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She didn't have to say anything. For once, I didn't feel like I was shouting into a void. And Lila, God, Lila, she stuck through every sleepless night, every failure, every slammed keyboard. When the funding papers were signed, we stood in the garage, the same one where it all began, and she whispered, "Told you we'd make it?" I didn't stop myself this time. I kissed her. But I wasn't done with Harlan, not yet. I printed the original newspaper photo, the one where I held up those torn notes with his red ink scrawled across them, and framed it. I sent it to his house. No note, no explanation. Just the image of me smiling, holding the proof of everything he tried to destroy. A week later, someone told me he'd been spotted in the grocery store. Disheveled, muttering to himself, people whispering behind his back. They said he avoided the magazine rack because he couldn't stand to see my face on the cover of tech journals. That's when it hit me. I didn't just prove him wrong. I rewrote the story. Forever, when people hear his name, they'll think of me. The student he tried to break, who built the very thing he mocked, who made him beg for scraps of recognition. And me? I finally stopped hearing his voice in my head. Now, when I work late into the night, when the cursor blinks at me in the dark, the only voice I hear is my own. You had what it takes all along.